From game day to signing day, breaking down every snap and all the news on Alabama's top football recruits. It's time for Crimson and Blue Chips with your host, John Garcia Jr.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in to a fresh edition of Crimson and Blue Chips. Hopefully your 4th of July went very, very well, but the barbecues are over, the fireworks are put down. Hopefully you didn't Jason Pierre-Paul yourself, and you're happy to listen to the show from anywhere but the hospital after your emergency surgery. Anyway, a lot to get to on this Thursday edition of the show. Of course, a ton more to get to from the opening finals. We touched on it, or we dug in on it really a lot on Tuesday, but we had so many voices on to talk about different kids. You know, Brian Doan, Kayvon Thibodeau, Bama fan Dave, Keon Zipper. We had a lot going on, and we kind of wanted to make it kind of a heavy hitter, quick hitter type of show. Today will be more of a classic Crimson and Blue Chips. You will hear from a 5-star, I will say that, but you're going to get a lot of me. You're going to get some of producer Kev jumping in here as we talk about the rest of the Bama commitments and targets, how they looked now that the opening finals has come to a conclusion. So a lot of evaluation and Crimson Tide recruiting talk coming to you right here on hashtag CABC.
Nakobe Dean here with us, 5-star linebacker. When Alabama is mentioned or brought up, or you bring it up, what immediately comes to mind for you?
The culture, Alabama is the whole culture of hard work and developing people for the next level.
I know you recently took another visit there. I mean, what's it like there for you, being a 5-star linebacker, a target for them?
Oh, it's great. They Coach Golden gonna tell me the truth. He gonna play with you. He real cool, but when he coming at the ball, he's serious. He gonna talk about the ball.
He's one of the newer guys at Alabama. What's he like for maybe Alabama fans who don't know much about him besides his resume?
Coach Golden, he real cool. I mean, he might seem like might seem a little crazy how he act, but not with me. That makes him more. It makes him more comfortable. It makes him more comfortable with me when I talk to him.
Gotcha.
So yeah, he a real cool guy.
What would be his plans for you should you choose Alabama?
Middle linebacker. Basically, he said I could play any of the linebacker positions, but he see me in the middle calling the plays and everything.
Does he throw out another name or a role that Alabama's had in the past or that he's had in the past?
Well, of course he gonna throw it out names, but he gonna always say he didn't coach them guys. He gonna throw out the names that he did coach and get to the league at the smaller shoe he was at.
Gotcha, man. And then just generally, who else for you right now comes to mind when somebody you don't know or a fan comes up and says, "Hey, man, who you really looking at?"
There's a lot of schools. Of course, Mississippi School, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, LSU, Alabama, Georgia, Auburn, FSU, and A&M most.
Any update or refreshment on the timeline when you may want to actually, narrow this thing down or end it?
December. I'm definitely ending December because I'm trying to do the early signing period. I'm probably not gonna think about it as much as when the season starts. I'm gonna be focused on the season.
Wanted to get you guys going with Nakobe Dean, a guy who looked really good out west, or I guess it's still technically west, but we usually say out west because it's in Oregon, but even in Dallas, still technically west. He's known as a versatile, do-it-all linebacker, and he looked like it. I only filmed one game where he was playing defense, and he had a game-changing interception in that game. He is incredible in space. We all know what he is academically. I mean, heck, he's got a real Stanford offer, so I shouldn't have to go into that. And obviously, with the pads on, he holds his own as well and in the running for the number one spot among linebackers. And as you can tell, Alabama's a real factor here. And I think it was good that he brought up Pete Golding. That's a guy, like I told him. I said, look, Bama fans are still kind of unfamiliar here. Now, Pete did help Alabama land their most recent commitment, which we'll get to in a second. But still, compared to Josh Gaddis, compared to Coach Cool, compared to some of these other new guys on staff, he's not getting talked about quite as much. So any intel we can get on Pete Golding, especially from arguably his top target, Nakobe Dean, that's good stuff. And that's why we led today's podcast with that. That was the plan. What was not the plan was to be talking about another new commitment. And we're not going to spend a bunch of time on it because we got a lot to get to from the opening. So next week we'll dig much more into Jason Jones and the new pledge, Byron Young. But Byron did jump on board at midnight, July 3rd into July 4th. I was sleeping. Hank South was sleeping. You were probably sleeping. But when you woke up, you got some good news. Another blue chip recruit jumping in for Alabama, a 4-star kid out of Mississippi, and another D lineman. How many? It's like every new commitment's a D lineman. And I know Jason Jones is 2020, who also committed this week. But even in 2019, you've got to have a full basketball roster out there. Producer Kev, how many D linemen for Bama now?
With Young, that makes a total of 6 now in the class.
Yeah, so is this going to be the first class Bama gets to 10? I don't know. But a lot of questions with Young, was he a take and different things like that. But, Bama just keeps adding D linemen. And now they've got another kind of strong side, 5 technique, edge setter out of Mississippi. So we'll read what he posted for his commitment. If you'd like to read more on him, please hit our partners at Bama Online. He tweeted at 1 o'clock a.m. his time, so 2 o'clock a.m., I guess, East Coast, for those of you listening there. He said, after much consideration, I have decided to commit. I'd like to thank every school that has shown interest in me, large or small. I'd like to thank my coaches for believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself, and for pushing me beyond the limits I at one point set for myself. I'd like to thank all of my coaches for putting me at practice and for all the great times we've had so far over my football career. I also want to thank my friends that have been there with me even before I was being noticed for football, especially Abby and John Micah, he said. I'd like to thank my family for all the sacrifices they've put me in the position I'm in, from my mother to my sister. They've all pushed me academically and physically to places beyond I thought I'd ever be. That's a clear theme in Byron's statement. Last but not least, I'd like to thank the man above for giving me that talent and the ability to play the sport I love. With that being said, I'd like to announce my commitment to the University of Alabama. Elephant emoji, elephant emoji, elephant emoji, roll, tide, roll. So Byron Young, the latest Mississippi verbal for Alabama, the latest blue chip verbal from Alabama, and what will become the busiest theme in this class of 2019 for the Tide, which is still number 1, the latest blue chip defensive lineman in this class. So again, we'll talk plenty more Byron Young and Jason Jones. Give them their due next week on the show, probably on Tuesday. But we still have a lot to get to from the opening finals. And, man, there's so many directions we could go. I guess we'll start with the guy that most people were curious about going into it, and that was Talia Tagovailoa. We all remember what his brother did a few years ago, 2 years ago, at this event. Near flawless in terms of what he did at quarterback, whether it was drills, 7-on-7. Basically everything went well for Tua. Now, we talked about Talia on Tuesday's show, and it was kind of up and down early. It wasn't going nearly as well as Tua, and unfortunately for Talia, the rest of the camp was kind of the same. It was up and down all the way through. They did win one playoff game, but they were ousted on the very next game by Bo Nix and company. Nonetheless, before they went on to lose in the championship game. So probably, the opposite of what Tua did is what Talia did. There were flashes. There were really nice plays, but there were more otherwise, whether it was settling underneath or, unfortunately for Talia, turning the football over, which was something that he's not really known for. But in this setting, going against the best, and again, we should preface the rest of this show by that. Look, this is the top 150 in America, the kids who competed at the opening. So if we're saying a kid looked like crap, let's make that on a relative scale. So he looked like crap going against the best players in America. Doesn't mean he's a bad prospect. Doesn't mean he's going to drop in the rankings and lose a star and all those things. So let's get that out right now before we overreact or even fans overreact to the production or lack thereof from any of these kids at the opening. They won't face anything like this until they get to college. So let's give them some benefit of the doubt. But compared to Tua, Talia came up legitimately short. That was one of the questions we had going in. A lot of people were focused on that. He actually got benched at one point. It just wasn't his 48 hours of 7-on-7 play. So on the bright side, you say, okay, 7-on-7 ball, a bunch of kids he doesn't know, plays he's not going to be running, and it didn't work out. Fine. But on the other side, you said every other time we've seen him in this setting, he's amazing. So what happened here? Was it just the talent? Was it just lack of chemistry? We don't really have those answers, but a humbling time for Talia. But just on the field, I want to stress that off of the field, Talia was Talia, and that was really encouraging. He was still making jokes, spending a bunch of time with family, and just kind of being the leader and the quarterback that a lot of people in the industry have been known or have come to know of him, I should say.
A positive note for Talia, though, is he did win the long toss.
Yeah, you see? Silver
He
lining.
threw 66 yards in the long toss.
And guess who he beat, guys? Bo Nix, 64 yards. They went back to back, actually. So you see, producer Kev jumping in with the silver lining. Yeah, Talia, look, the arm strength not an issue. The release not an issue. He's working on his body. He looks better. And look, he's known for good decision making usually. And let's also say that the 7-on-7 tournaments that they have won, Thompson won the 7-on-7 tournament at Alabama. They won the 7-on-7 tournament at South Alabama, and they came second at the 7-on-7 tournament at Auburn, all led by Talia. So with his team and in his scheme, almost perfect in terms of win-loss at big-time, Southeast regional tournaments against other teams. So his actual team stuff really couldn't be going much better. So let's also reemphasize that. And look, he's a Tingle Vailoa. His demeanor is not going to change. Good, bad, win, lose, eat, don't eat. Those guys are pretty consistent all the way through, and that's what you want from your quarterback. So we had to address that elephant in the room, no pun intended, and I'm assuming we'll have some questions about his recruitment later, so we'll save that for the Q&A portion of the show. But one of the reasons that we turn producer Kev's mic on for the first time is because the opening finals, and you guys who know me know where I'm going. The opening finals it's the best 48 to 72 hours we get in the entire recruiting calendar for offensive linemen and defensive linemen. The best of the best are here. They're all in pads for the most part. They're all wearing helmets at least, and they're all going after it. These coaches do a really good job of setting up the matchups, and we get good on good on good on good all the way through. So our best look at these kids, is on the O-line and the D-line. Quarterbacks and everybody, it's 7-on-7. There's no D-line. There's no running the football. Crazy rules, whatever. That's a little removed from the game. Linebackers and running backs, they're playing freaking cat and mouse with 20 yards of field. How often does that happen? It's crap. Don't tell the opening. But the linemen, we get good on good in the phone booth, inside out drills, and man, did we get enough one-on-ones? Guys, we got 150 reps of one-on-ones in one day. And we had a bunch the day before and a bunch the day after, which was the final day on Tuesday. So we got as good a look and as wide a look as we could possibly get on a lot of prospects that you want to hear about. Pierce Quick, Clay Webb, Kevin Harris, Kayvon Thibodeau, Nolan Smith, Siaki Ika, Darnell Wright, Evan Neal, kind of a newer name in the conversation. All of these guys heavily involved with Alabama. Some obviously already committed. Mohamed Diabate was there competing. I mean, a lot of local names, a lot of commits, and plenty of targets getting it in. And I want to get my producer on. For those who don't know, producer Kev, my college teammate many years ago, as we get older, and was much more successful on the field than me. He was an all-conference prospect at center and guard. He played tackle. He was the Barrett Jones of our team, if that makes sense, guys. So that's why we got his mic hot today, because he has been excited to check out the O-line, D-line as much as anyone. He's one of the guys I go to for my evaluations just to make sure we're on the same page, because he knows the intricacies that I don't. You guys know how I get talking DBs. He's like that with O-line, D-line. So want to bring him in. Kev, look, it was fun and it was a lot. I mean, there were so many reps that you got to see basically the good and bad of every single prospect, which is something that at most camps we don't get to see. So who do you want to start breaking down? Because we almost got to go one by one here.
Yeah. Well, we can start with the newer name in the group, Evan Neal.
Yeah, and he's the guy who's kind of stock up the most, I think, from this week. And Bama fans, you may remember when he was a freshman, committed to Alabama for about, I don't know, 10 days before his family talked him out of it, and he realized what he had done. Big first offer was Bama. Kid jumped on it. He was like 14. Who could blame him, right? But since then, decommitted. And really, it seemed like Bama had been hot and cold with him, but it's certainly trending much more towards the hot side. Miami is the legit competition for Alabama here. He's an IMG kid, so obviously Miami a little closer to home for him. But there's no doubt that Alabama really wants this kid, and he showed us why, didn't he, Kev?
I mean, he was impressive. I mean, he's 6'7", 350, and moved very well for his size, getting off the ball. I mean, 1 reps against Thibodeau, who's the number 1 prospect in the country. I mean, he showed flashes of why Alabama is now, kind of feeling like they need to get in on this guy.
Yeah, and I think that was probably the biggest question he answered. The question we always have for Evan is, how does his body look? Because the kid was pushing 4 bills at one point. We knew it was too much. He knew it was too much, and he's clearly really worked on that. But the second question always with him is, can he play tackle in the SEC? Can he play tackle at the highest level? And the default kind of answer has been, well, if anything, he could be a guard or a right tackle, and that's still true. But did he show you enough to say, you know what, put this kid at left tackle, at least to start off at the next level?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that from watching the reps from one-on-ones, and there was a lot of them, and he went a lot, he definitely looked like he could play tackle in the SEC. I mean,
yeah, so that's what else do you need to know, right? I mean, you said the size, 6'7", 6'8", 355 or whatever, and he wanted it out there against those guys. And look, you couldn't, and the video is all free, guys. If you want to take a look, there's a bunch of it, and there's a bunch more coming. Trust me, my eyes will be bleeding by the end of it. But there was really no hiding if you were a tackle, because there are such good edge rushers in this class. Kevin mentioned number 1 player of the country, Kayvon Thibodeau. Well, how about the guy who might become number 1 in the country and as my number 1, Nolan Smith? I mean, those are clearly the 2 best edge rushers in America. He had to deal with both of those guys, and heck, he's got to deal with Nolan in practice every day, which has probably helped him play tackle, ascend to tackle status better than anything. But even beyond those guys, you get the Bama commitment, Kevin Harris, who comes screaming off of the edge. You get some of these other edge rushing prospects who are more combination guys, like a Travon Walker, who can come outside, come inside. He's a 5-star based off of athleticism and upside. And for the most part, Neal won more than he lost, and there was some dominance in there as well. What does he still need to get better at, though, Kev? How does he stamp, hey, I'm a tackle, as opposed to right now where we're like, okay, I think you can play tackle. When does he make it like validated?
He definitely seems like he needs to get more comfortable in that tackle stance. You can tell he's a bigger guy that's lost weight, and he's still, maturing into that body that he has. And I think once he gets that going, and I mean he's got a great first step off the ball. But once he gets, more comfortable out there and in space, then I mean I honestly think he could be, top tackle in the country in that discussion. I mean, he looked real deal.
Yeah, no doubt. And again, Bama is recognizing that. I think even before this event in particular, there was a little bit more momentum and juice with Bama and Evan Neal than he had given off, and maybe even more than our sources in Tuscaloosa had been given off. He took a visit earlier this summer in June, spent multiple days there. We know he's a teammate of Trey Sanders at IMG and Nolan Smith, a couple of other Alabama targets. So that doesn't hurt any of the other ones if one of those guys jumps on board first. I think Neal probably the closest to shutting down his recruitment compared to the other two. So there's some traction here between Alabama and Evan Neal. Miami's kind of the perceived favorite and the school that maybe in state has the best shot. But it's not over, and certainly Bama's in the conversation. We know we're taking a bunch of D linemen when we look at Alabama, but there's going to be a big O line class as well. And the more we look at it, the more Evan Neal looks like he's one of the absolute top targets at the position. So let's stay on offense, Kev, and let's go to some the Bama commitment in the group here. Pierce Quick. Now, caveat: Quick, the guys from Alabama. So Quick, Clay Webb, Diabate. We don't get to see them in full pads. They got the helmet, they got the spider pads on, and that's it because of the rules in this state, which are outdated and need to change. If you guys are listening, change those damn rules. But
Absolutely, it's
for
terrible.
yeah, and
Terrible.
you're hurting these kids because look, Ishmael Sopsher out of Louisiana, no pads. Zach Harrison, number one player on 24/7 Sports, no pads. Pierce Quick, Clay Webb. I mean, these guys are composite 5 stars, all of them, and we didn't get them in the same light that we got Nolan Smith and Evan Neal and Kayvon Thibodeau and Jacob Bandis and Siaki Ika, guys who are really upping their stock because we got the full look. We got kind of the partial look with these other guys, but there's still a lot to be taken away from these other prospects who weren't in full gear. And as I said, Pierce Quick, I mean, he had to go against, one of the freakiest edge rushers in the country in Zach Harrison and one of the fastest locally in Mohamed Diabate. So he had to combat a lot of speed. Kev, how do you think Pierce represented himself, especially knowing that this was really his first showcase event coming off of off-season shoulder surgery?
Yeah, Pierce, well, like you said, obviously I would have loved to see him in pads. Once again, if people are listening, let's change that rule, please. But no, Pierce looked good, especially coming off off-season injury. He looked good getting out of his stance. Obviously, he's going against these two freakishly fast and athletic edge rushers. And, I mean, he held his own. There was a couple times where he gets beat around the corner, but overall, I mean, he held his way pretty good to not be in pads, especially with those fast edge rushers. Like, being in pads would have been a big help for him, like having to deal with those kids coming off the edge like that.
Yeah, what exactly does that help? Because I think that's a good point, and a lot of our listeners might maybe never played, or if they played, they weren't, all-state offensive linemen like you. What difference does it make? Because you've done 1 million one-on-ones without pads, and you've done 5 million with pads. What is the real difference, and how could that have aided a guy like Pierce Quick against some of those edge benders?
It makes all the difference because when you're kick stepping and you're getting off the ball and you're thinking about, making contact, and then all of a sudden you got to realize I don't have pads on, and it changes how hard you're going, to be honest. I mean, if we're being honest, there's a lot of times in no pads that not going 100% during one-on-ones. It's kind of a pointless drill if you're not in pads, to be honest.
Interesting.
But it's especially coming off the edge because you want to be able to. A lot of times, if that guy coming off the edge is going to be low. I mean, shoot, a couple reps where guys were so low they were falling on the ground. You want to be able to put your shoulder in somebody's back.
Yeah, so there's
And
more.
you don't got
So
balls
essentially,
on.
there's more space. There's more space for those edge guys to bend, right?
Yeah, because we're not, as an offensive lineman in no pads, they're going to have more space because we're not trying to go low and make that contact if we don't have pads on, to be honest.
Yeah. So some of those times that Harrison in particular got off of the edge, I think that's just something you think about. I mean, we don't think about it enough on our side of it, but no pads versus pads, and I think that's why when it came to 24/7 Sports and us putting together kind of this dream team that we put out on Tuesday night, we took that into consideration. It's almost like the guys without pads are almost canceling themselves out. And there were some really good efforts, I thought, with those guys. And again, multiple 5-stars: Sopsher, Clay Webb, Pierce Quick, Zach Harrison. Zach Harrison, 6'6", he ran 4.4 at this thing. I mean, it's a shame that we didn't get to see him go against Evan Neal and Darnell Wright and Kenyon Green, who was a monster. He ain't going to Bama, but when Bama plays Texas A&M, if
He's a monster.
if you're listening, future DNs at Alabama or anywhere else in the SEC West, look out for Kenyon Green. That's an NFL guy if I've seen one. It was a shame. We would have loved to seen all of those edge rushers, because really this class at the top nationally, it's an edge rusher class. Last year it was quarterbacks, right? Trevor Lawrence 1, Justin Fields 2, JT Daniels ended up getting his 5th star late. It was a great year for quarterbacks, and it's the opposite this year. First of all, quarterbacks were almost boring at this event, but it's edge rushers at that spot. It's Zach Harrison and Nolan Smith and Kayvon Thibodeau. Those are the guys, and we would have loved to seen all of them on an even playing field. But the state of Ohio is sleeping just like Alabama and Louisiana. I mean, Mississippi got to go. I mean, Mississippi, Georgia, Florida, these guys are full gear going all out, and these other guys are hurting a little bit for that. So that's a little unfortunate, but hopefully one day we get everybody on the same page. So, yeah, so Pierce Quick, still got a long way to go, I think, eventually. Kev, we get a lot of questions about him as well. Guard, center, tackle. It seems like he can play anywhere because he's an athlete, but once he does fill out, gets over the shoulder issue, you think clear tackle here, or do you play into the versatility and allow him to move around?
Yeah, I think you play into his versatility. When you got a guy that can play multiple positions, you use that to your advantage, especially being in the SEC where you never know who's going to go down with what injury and all that stuff. I mean, you use that kid wherever you can put him. You find a way to get him on the field. If he can play all 5 positions, then that's an offensive line coach's dream. I used to have an offensive line coach that would say, you're way more valuable to me if you can play all 5 positions. And all 5 positions is a definite upside for him.
Yeah, so you can almost see what Alabama's doing with this O-line group, right? They've got Pierce Quick committed. He might be your utility guy. Clay Webb, who we'll talk about in a second, is the clear top target, a clear interior guy. And it looks like, they want a true tackle to pair with these guys because these guys can move around a little bit more. So your Evan Neals, Darnell Wrights of the world are becoming a little more important, I think, for Alabama. It's becoming clearer that Webb is going to be inside. Quick can be inside or outside. So you want a little bit more stability with the remaining targets, and that's why you're seeing Bama go after 5-star Darnell Wright, who's coming back later this month for that barbecue, his next visit to Bama. Obviously, Evan Neal, 4-star right now. Heck of a showing this past week. And Bama would have loved to continue to recruit him or Wanye Morris, other guys who were there and played really well down in Dallas. But I think those guys are pretty solid with their schools. Morris to Tennessee and Kenyon Green, especially Kenyon Green to Texas A&M. I don't think he'll even take another visit. So that's something there. But Clay Webb, who we've talked about here, obviously number 1 player in the state, and a 5-star and a guy who has been unbelievable in camp settings. And, this was kind of weird, right, Kev? Like you've seen video of this cat for like what? For like 4 years dominating in Atlanta and in Bama and in Florida and wherever. And he still flashed that, but it certainly wasn't what we're used to. Now, is this a competition increase and that's why? Or is it what did you see with Clay Webb?
I mean, yeah, it's really weird to watch Clay Webb lose multiple reps in a one-on-one. I mean, that's probably, he said, you showed me this kid, yeah, probably 3-4 years ago, and watching his video and watching him at these camp settings, I mean, it's weird to see him lose more than one rep. But I'd want to say again that, it's the pads. I hope it's the pads. He honestly actually weirdly looked better as a tackle in his one-on-ones
Which
than he did as a...
said nobody ever before this.
Exactly. That's why I'm like, it's got me baffled. I don't know. It's weird to see Clay Webb not dominate.
Yeah, and for the record, when he's at tackle, he's going against Harrison a little bit and Mohamed Diabate, who is a good player, but I think he's a guy who should probably be at the second level, not at the first level. He's really light, and once Clay Webb gets his hands on a guy like that, it's really over. And when he was inside, I mean, he's going against the number one DT in America, Ishmael Sopsher, and it wasn't completely one-sided. There was some back and forth there. So same question, I guess, Kev. We know on the edge, that guy who wants to turn the corner like Von Miller and Khalil Mack has more space to do so without pads. What about inside, where we think it's more of a phone booth, but what's the difference with pads, without pads, in the trenches and one-on-ones?
I mean, inside it's more of an attack game when it comes to pass blocking. Centers and guards are doing more attacking than they are, pass setting. We're not taking big lateral or big vertical sets like tackles do. We're taking more lateral steps. It's close quarters engagement, and when you don't have pads on in close quarters like that, it's really hard, especially when you're going against the number one D tackle in the country. I mean,
yeah, and Sopsher looked good. He looked a little trim. He looked like he was around 295, 305, and he was looking quick out there, much quicker and slimmer than I'd seen him. So is that why, Kev, where it's kind of, it seems like the guards and centers, it's so lopsided. Whoever wins the rep, it's like a dominant win, or it seems like a dominant win. And it wasn't just these two, Cardell Thomas and Jacob Bandis, Siaki Ika. It seemed like when those guys won, it was as clear as day. And is that why? Is because it's in such close quarters?
Yeah, it's close quarters, and probably 8-9 times out of 10, a defensive lineman is going to throw his move, and that's his move, especially as like an interior guy. Interior guys maybe have 1 to 2 solid moves, and it's you throw those 1 to 2 solid moves, and if it's a good O lineman that makes the right call and catches that move, it's a dominating win. If he misses that move, it's a dominating win going the other way. So it's a lot of chess inside. You got to think.
Yeah, and that's why some of these guys had unbelievable weeks. Siaki Ika, that push-pull was getting every offensive lineman on the floor. Jacob Bandis, it seemed like his leverage, man. He's a little shorter already, so he's just got an ability to win that battle off rip, and not a lot of guys could recover. The only guy who could recover, I think, won MVP, Harry Miller, the center going to Ohio State. He was really good. And that's another thing. We miss out on seeing Harry Miller at center and Clay Webb at center, full geared up, going against these great defensive tackles to settle, hey, who is the number one center in America? Because guess what? Harry Miller's going to have all the buzz following this event because he was able to do it in pads, and Clay Webb is kind of neutral in the buzz department because we got a sample. We didn't get the full look because he's only able to go against 2 or 3 guys. That has hurt a lot of kids from Alabama over the years. I think that hurt LeBron Ray coming out. It hurt Deron Payne coming out. It left more questions than it answered because other guys were able to kind of make their moves and they were unable to, even though Ray and Payne and these guys were really good in this event, we didn't get to see it to that extent because they weren't in full gear. So it's not time to panic on Clay Webb, is it, Kevin?
No, definitely not.
You still take him? Do you still take him as number one center in the country?
Yeah, I'm taking him number one.
Why do you think he had more success at tackle besides not having to deal with Sopsher? Or was that just it?
No, I mean the competition difference, and I think he plays tackle for his high school, so he's probably he's taking tackle reps in high school, so he might be a little bit more comfortable at the moment playing tackle, but I mean he's definitely a center in the long run.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So there's the in-state guys, the commits, the target. Now, out of state, there was some more interesting guys. Let's go back to a Bama commitment. Kevin Harris, he's one who coming in, a lot of us thought, hey, if he has some kind of week, if he has the Rashawn Gary week and the Nolan Smith week and the week that we think he could have as a speed guy, maybe, just maybe, he flirts with 5-star status. It didn't happen. But it doesn't mean he didn't flash along the way. When he won on the edge, it was almost like what we talked about with the interior guys, right? It was like if his move worked, it was beautiful. But if it didn't work, it looked terrible. Clearly he's raw, but how good is that first step? You saw him in full gear, just like Nolan Smith, just like Kayvon Thibodeau, who we'll talk about in a second. You saw these guys in full gear. That first step, just the first step of Kevin Harris, where does it stack up with those guys? As a guy who would have to defend that, how do you rank those three with that? Just the first step.
When looking at their first steps, I'm definitely going Nolan Smith off the ball. That kid is incredibly fast off the ball.
Can we start calling him just Freak Smith? I mean, are we there yet? Are we there?
That's pretty accurate. Didn't he win the Spark rating?
Yeah, I mean this usually the Spark champ is like a running back, a slot receiver, a corner, the Tony Browns of the world, Landon Collins. Like, nope, defensive end, outside back.
Yeah, defensive end. Yeah.
Yeah, he ran 4.50, jumped 40 inches, ran like a 4.1 shuttle. Yep. There's Nolan Smith for you. So you give him the edge in the first step game. All right, where's Harris and Thibodeau in that department?
I'm second behind Smith. I'm going Harris. That kid's getting off the ball. I mean, he made Jonah.
Oh, go for the last name. Do it. Try it.
Tua Ananui.
I don't know if it's right, but it sounds good to me.
Hey, we're gonna try. If I mispronounce your name, I apologize, sir. He made him look, pretty bad coming off the ball. Like you said, that was an either he won or he lost. And Kevin Harris, that ball coming off that ball, made that one move. He used his speed to his advantage and hit that jab step and came inside. That was pretty. And then third, Thibodeau, not taking anything away from him. He still has a great first step. But, I mean, Nolan Smith and Kevin Harris they're coming off that ball like they're shot out of rocket. I mean.
Right. And that's what I wanted to prove. Because Kevin Harris is going to get his 5th star tomorrow doesn't mean he had a bad week. And even though he lost half his reps, it doesn't mean he had a bad week, because now on the same field, even somebody who hasn't seen all three at different points can say, okay, just in terms of first step explosion, this guy is elite, because we've already acknowledged Nolan Smith is freaky good. So he's almost like by himself in some of these categories. So Kevin Harris to be ahead of the number one player and edge rusher in America on the 24/7 Sports composite ranking, so that's everybody's rankings, pretty good for Kevin Smith. Now, clearly, there's a lot of other points of Thibodeau's game that are right now more advanced than Harris's, but the foundation is there. And it looks like he's put on some good weight, too. That was something we brought up last week. I mean, Kevin Harris was like 200 pounds the last time I saw him a few months back. It looks like, what do you think, Kev? Like 220-ish? Yeah, he's clearly focused on filling out his frame.
Yeah, he definitely looks like he's probably, that 220, 225 range.
Right. So he's
He
doing
looks
the
good.
the first thing we all wanted to see him do, which was gain
Wait.
weight. Now, again, as we said with Talia and some of these other guys, going against the best in the country. Literally, this isn't this isn't the Under Armour and Army games where everything is split. So the two best corners are at Under Armour, and the three best D tackles are at Army, and all of that. So where we get a little derived at that Army Bowl Under Armour week. We get some of the best on best. This is literally the best on best. It's everybody. There's not an elite prospect at those two positions, tackle, DN, D tackle, guard, center, that didn't earn their way here unless they really dropped the ball. I mean, you gotta look. Let's be honest. You guys know there's some politics involved in this game, and if I'm breaking news to you, you have a lot to learn, young squire. But there's a lot of politics in this game. If you are a top 100 type prospect, you have to suck at these events not to get invited to the opening. Look, they have a job to do, right? They have to get butts in the seats. They got to get media there to cover it. And if they tell you otherwise, they're lying. Like their video says, stars don't matter. We don't care where you're ranked. Yes, they do. Because if it was a bunch of 2 stars, nobody would go. So let's make that very clear. If you were the best of the best this year, you were at this event. So Harris is going against, once again, the best of the best. So the first step looked great. His inside move looked great. What went wrong, though, Kev? What went wrong when he lost? Because when he did, it was like people were like, this kid's going to Bama. And obviously they're overreacting. They're knee-jerk reacting. They don't understand. But why did it look so bad at times?
I think he's still very raw in this game. Wasn't he originally a linebacker at some point?
Yeah, he's moved around a bunch. As we said, it's like
down.
he just went over 200 pounds. So he's at Grayson.
Yeah.
So those guys at Grayson, they're going to utilize whatever they have to do to win a game on Friday night. They know about the college game and they'll help you with the projection, but on Fridays, they're about Fridays. So he has moved around some.
Yeah, so I mean, he's still learning. He's still learning to play with his hands in dirt, and I mean, he has a. I'll go with this. He looks like he has a limited bag, and when you have a limited bag and you're going against great competition, and you throw that one, and that one misses, you're getting KO'd.
So he's like J.R. Smith.
Yeah, exactly. he's either hoisting and turning and running down the court, swish, or he's hoisting and it's clanking off the backboard.
Got it. Yeah, and that makes sense. That's good. That's good for our listeners to hear because this is something we've talked about. We've talked about how great he is with that first step and screaming off the edge, but we've also talked about his need to round out his game. Getting past high school tackles with that first step will be easy for him the rest of this year. But obviously, our business is a projection business towards the NFL, in theory, one day. So that won't fly at that level. Remember, just again, he reminds me of Tim Williams. He's a guy who, in high school, was just screaming off the edge. But when he got to Bama, they had to say, "Hold on now, Tim. We got to do some other things." And eventually, it worked out, and he got drafted, and he's in the league now. But coming out of high school, these two were very similar. I mean, Tim Williams looked like a linebacker to me. He didn't even look like a true defensive end. He was like 218 at the Under Armour game. So, one, you should be encouraged by that projection working out. And two, you should be encouraged by the fact that Harris has theoretically already exceeded Tim Williams in terms of weight in a shorter time span. So, in theory, when he enrolls at Alabama, I don't know, January or even June of next year, he could be closer to 230 or so before Scott Cochran gets his hands on him and obviously helps him push for more weight without losing some of that signature explosion. Because just in that regard, and I agree with Kev here, he's ahead of Kayvon Thibodeau. Kayvon Thibodeau, we might as well talk about Thibodeau now because we've been hinting at him so much. He is a very good athlete. He is a very good edge rusher, but he's more of a football player. compared to
Yeah.
Nolan Smith or Kevin Harris, where these guys are just athletically, you could see them doing this on a basketball court or on offense as a receiver or tight end or something. You don't really say that with Thibodeau, but he's got this overall skill set. But if you know your guy is that much better than a guy who everybody in the industry right now considers number one, that is something potentially special. And that is why the get of Kevin Harris and the solidity of his commitment, I think, is pretty big for Bama, even though he did not go do what Rashawn Gary did at this event. So let's pivot to Thibodeau. Kev, you've seen a bunch of him. He was on our show Tuesday. I know you helped cut up some of that video. I mean, I had some questions coming in. You know, you guys, everybody knows by now how I feel about Nolan Smith as an edge rusher and as other prospects in general at the top of the list in the national rankings. So I didn't even think Thibodeau was the number one defensive end, much less number one overall player. So I was curious to see how he worked, but I got to say I'm humbled. The kid did everything I asked and more, and I think, solidified his status as the potential number one guy. What did you see from Thibodeau, who, again, we all admit doesn't have the first step of these other guys, but he's got some other things working for him?
Yeah, he definitely, like you said, he doesn't have the first step that these guys have, but he's got a deep bag. If he's a football player. You could tell he's been working at this for a while. His moves are polished. He definitely works on his craft. He's a polished pass rusher, and he goes and gets the football. I've watched some of his high school film. I've watched him in one-on-ones, and he goes and gets the football. He plays football. That's all I can say about him. Like I said, his pass rush, he's polished in his pass rush. His moves are fluid, and if he throws one and it misses, he can throw another one and still win. So
did he do that in Dallas? I almost said Oregon again. In Dallas, did he do that? Did he lose that initial move and recover enough to actually win reps against these guys?
Yeah, there was one against Neal where he threw the first one, missed, and was able to recover, and in my opinion, still win the rep. I don't know who they gave it to officially, but in my opinion, he won the rep.
Well, and this is coming from an O-lineman, so if you think he won the rep, then he won the rep, because y'all know how these O-linemen are. If it's all even, the O-line won it, because they'll say the quarterback rolled out and stepped up and shuffle-stepped and has Tom Brady's awareness and all that, right?
That ball got off, son. That ball got off.
He's got a quick release. He's throwing off his back foot. It's still accurate. Jay Cutler, whatever, no big deal. Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, it was a 3-step drop. That ball's gone. That ball's gone.
Yeah, we've got a dual thread. Like, it's fine. Figure it out.
Yeah.
So if he's saying that Thibodeau still won that rep, he won it. And we talked about this on Tuesday. Bama's made these huge splashes in Cali, right? Najee, Jonah Williams. I mean, at the time, Blake Barnett. They've really put in good work in Cali and the West Coast. Of course, you really start that conversation, I guess, nowadays with Tua. But this year, there's not a lot of flavor there. 2020 will be heavy Bama in the West Coast. I hinted at that. I will hint at that for the next year. But 19, it's like if Bama's going to make the splash, it's this guy, Kayvon Thibodeau. I don't know. Talking to him, like before I talked to him, I said, okay, Florida State and Oregon. Those are kind of the schools that have the most buzz. Florida, USC, and Bama are kind of like in there, but it has felt like these other schools have had more buzz. Some people default and think, okay, he's the best prospect in Cali. He's going to go to USC. Other people are like, all right, well, he wants to play in the South, and he loves Willie Taggart and company. They recruited him a ton at Oregon. FSU is going to be the surprise school. There hasn't been a lot of Bama flavor here, especially compared to guys that Bama has even trended up for. There's much more Bama flavor now with Trey Sanders, obviously Evan Neal, who we've talked about. There's always been a Bama flavor or flair with Clay Webb. It wouldn't surprise anyone if those guys ended up in the class, but I still think Thibodeau would be a surprise. I still think he would be a guy who really moves the needle and really sustains Alabama on the West Coast. And who did he mention first? Tosh Lupoy, who's the guy who's really known, along with Lane Kiffin, for helping Bama dig into the West Coast. How important a get would this be, Kev? Just perceptionally, because we think Nolan Smith's pretty solid to Georgia. Zach Harrison, the other top edge guy, he's going to end up at, I don't know, Penn State, Ohio State, somewhere up there in Big Ten land so he can run after unathletic quarterbacks and make his stats look good. What about Thibodeau? How big would that be in moving the needle and getting one of these guys? Because I think these three have kind of separated themselves as the premier edge rushers. How big would that be perceptionally and then just on the field? I mean, is this a guy who can play early even at a school like Alabama?
I mean, I think it's going to be huge if they could pull him out of California. It's shoot. The whole time I've been growing up watching football and hearing these kids, any of these good kids in California, they're going to SC. Like that's been the norm. So I mean, for Bama to go in there and pull a kid out of California that's could be the number one player in the country. I think that's huge perceptionally. As far as like what he could do for them now, I think it's a stacked defensive line, but I think he could definitely contribute in some fashion early.
Do you think could he be a jack, stand up, hand in the dirt? Can he do both? I mean, is he that polished? Because I don't think that's something we've seen with Alabama. It's been usually hand in the dirt dude or a guy who wants to stand up, who they allow to stand up. Are you talking about a polished guy where he can perhaps do either or?
Yeah, I think so, to be honest. I think he could do either or. He's one of those guys that, I just think that if he wants to, I think he could do that. I think he could play jack. He could put his hand in the dirt. He could do both.
Excellent. And that's, again, part of the reason why the industry as a whole feels he's the guy to really set the table for this class. So we'll see how Bama combats that. And look, the last thing he said yesterday on the show, or Tuesday on the show, was, I'll be back to Alabama. He was actually being pulled away. They had to go to some meeting or a photo shoot or some social crap. But he was pulled away and said, yeah, I'll be back. So Bama's got him on campus twice on his own dime, and he's already saying he will be back. So theoretically, Bama gets one more shot in person with Kayvon Thibodeau, and that becomes a little bit more important than we thought coming into the opening. Because I honestly, going into it, I thought Nolan Smith would separate himself from Thibodeau as the top guy. And while I still feel he's the more freaky upside dude, that gap is razor thin between these two guys. And I think everybody kind of feels that way after watching them go against the same guys, as we mentioned. And one of those guys was Darnell Wright. He's one who had a bit of an up and down week. He played more guard than I think a lot of us anticipated, but he's another one, Kev. Showed some things, and he's coming back to Tuscaloosa at the end of the month. So for your final evaluation here, I'll set the table for you on Darnell Wright. What did you see from the 5-star out of West Virginia, which is probably something we've never said in the recruiting game?
I was about to say, that sounds really unfamiliar. But no, he definitely showed flashes, like you said. And this is probably his big moment. I would imagine there's not a lot of 5-stars playing around in West Virginia.
You mean he's not blocking Nolan Smith on Friday nights out there in Huntington?
No, not at all. So for him to perform well at a stage like this, I think it's big for him as far as answering questions, checking boxes. He definitely looked more comfortable on the inside. I think he's probably a guard.
Really?
In the long run. Yeah.
So
in my opinion.
So if Bama's going to make this O-line group, this dream O-line group, and they're looking for the true tackle, are you just purely on what we know right now, are you taking Evan Neal as more of that pure future tackle than Darnell Wright?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What makes the difference there with those two?
Yeah, I'm going with Neal as the more true tackle in the group. His vertical kicks looked better. He did better against the speed guys. Wright struggled a little bit with the speed guys. They were getting around him better than they were with our man, Mr. Neal. So I definitely would take Neal as the more true tackle in this group if we're putting them against each other.
Yeah, he was definitely better at this event. Look, plain and simple. Evan Neal won reps against both Thibodeau and Nolan Smith at times, and Darnell Wright, I don't think beat any of those guys once. At least not that I've seen. I'm still logging one of the 350 clips I got on video, but so far I hadn't seen that one just yet. So sometimes it's a little simpler when we think about it. But I think you talk about a kid who needs these kind of reps and needs these kind of days. Darnell Wright, like you said, he's not facing these dudes very often. So an event like this, invaluable to him. I believe he's an Army All-American. Wherever he plays, if I'm him, I'm trying to play as many All-Star games as I can. Those reps will really aid his transition from high school ball to the SEC or wherever he's going to play. Tennessee, Bama, there's a couple schools feel good right now because he needs it. He's got the talent and athleticism. Nobody's debating those things. But positionally, he needs those reps. He's going to be a left tackle in basically the minor leagues for the NFL. But that's why we wanted to bring producer Kev's mic up. You guys may not know, but he is a critical part of this CABC engine. We expanded exponentially on social media and email and all of these platforms, and he's really spearheaded that along with our marketing. So publicly, as many times as I said privately, Kev, thank you. Thank you for joining us officially and making your debut, even though you've heard more of these than anybody else could admit. So thanks for the insight. We'll probably bring you on when we talk more of the big uglies because it's just fun. I hope listeners have learned something like I have. Look, again, you guys know me. If I don't know something, I don't try to know it. I don't pretend. And I can't eval a left guard like I can eval a slot corner. It's just the truth. Doesn't mean I'm not going to work at it. Doesn't mean I'm not going to try to get better, but this is where you get better. You got to learn something. And I think we learned a lot about maybe why some of these non-padded camps aren't as big a deal as sometimes we make them. But that is probably deserved of its own podcast before every camp company in the country takes away my credentials. So we'll leave that alone for the rest of today's show. But Kev, appreciate you, man. Keep doing a great job, and we'll send you this audio later on.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it as always. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Great discussion with Kevin. Great early interview with Nakobe Dean today. Really excited about bringing those elements to you guys, two newer elements to CABC. But the bread and butter of the program, as most of you well know, is Q&A. It's how we end each and every show. Even if it's just a couple of questions, we try to get the listeners involved each and every time. And the information is flowing so steady right now with evaluations, commitments, the board, things like that, that we're a little behind on Q&A. But we do have time to catch up a little bit today. At least 3 or 4 will be answered before the end of the program, and we will kick that off via Twitter. Our buddy Josh tweets in an interesting one. Where would you rank Trey Sanders in last year's running back class? That's his first question. Well, Josh, for those who don't remember, bit of a weak year at running back last year. We were spoiled 2 years ago. That was the Najee Harris, Cam Akers, Kalen LeBourne class. That was simply special. I mean, that class had a little bit of every type of good running back, and each is seemingly a 5-star type without really having to dig too deep down into the well to find the next guy who was in that conversation. Stephen Carr was in that class. Heck, DeAndre Swift was in that class. It was an embarrassment of riches in that class of 2017. 2018, not the same. The top guy, however, was Zamir White. He would have fit in well to that class of 2017. He would have somehow jumped into that conversation with Najee Harris and Cam Akers as arguably the top running back in the country. But after Zamir in the 2018 class, there was a huge drop off, in my opinion, in terms of 5-star talent, in terms of top end ability. The composite had it like this. We'll go 1 through 10. Zamir White, Lorenzo Lingard, Brian Snead, Ricky Person, Harold Joyner, Keontae Ingram, Cameron Davis, Damian Pierce, Asa Martin, Maurice Washington. First of all, of that list, I would have had Pierce and Martin much higher. Second of all, Harold Joyner may not even end up playing running back at the next level. I saw him at Auburn's camp the other day. Dude is legit 6'4" right now. Lean, probably 215 or so. I mean, he's looking more and more like a flex tight end by the day, but he's going to start off his Auburn career at running back. So you could already see some of the flaws in the rankings from the 18 class. So where would Trey rank in that group? I would take Zamir White over him again. Zamir White is in that Najee Harris, Cam Akers, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry conversation. Legitimate 5-star, legitimate top 10 type player in America. So that's sort of separate. So Trey, in my opinion, isn't quite there just yet. I think he's more of a developmental running back in that regard. But after that, I mean, you could really make the argument Trey could fit in right there. I didn't love the overall games of really the next three guys on the composite. Lingard, shifty, longer, not as physical, but he was talented and very fast. So he got some love. Brian Snead, I watched play multiple times. He was a teammate of Jerome Ford, the Alabama running back signee. Brian, very good tackle to tackle, powerful, compact, wasn't going to burn you, wasn't going to juke you, but pound for pound, tough, durable, but not flashy and not great in space. And then Ricky Person, the opposite. This dude could run in between the tackles effectively, but really where he shined, if my memory serves, was in space and out in the open. So really there was some true variety at the top of the list there, but there wasn't a lot of strength at the top of that group. So I think in this class, I think Trey would have been 2 or 3. I think you can make the argument with Lingard in terms of upside once he fills out and rounds out his game. His natural wiggle and speed was kind of unmatched in that class. So you could make the argument that upside-wise, down the road, he's the number 2 guy. And then probably Trey somewhere thereafter between he and Brian Snead. I think Snead is the better running back right now, but I think long-term Trey has some qualities that are still more exotic than Snead's. So I think Trey would have been probably 2 or 3 in that class. I think he's got a great overall game, still learning the nuances of the position in terms of just when to take risks, vision balance, cut back lanes, things like that. But the raw ability, long speed, good frame and power is all there for Trey. And Trey looks good. We saw him at the opening. He looks quite fit, in that 215, 220 range, carrying it very, very well. I think he's poised for a huge senior year with all eyes on him at IMG Academy. Good question from Josh there. You got one more in here looking at a quarterback. Tell me about Cornelius Brown. How good of a prospect is he? Should he be rated higher? Well, Josh, Cornelius, or Quad as he's known as locally in the Birmingham area, is a very good quarterback prospect. Obviously tall, 6'5", 180 pounds, pro-style guy, not as athletic as you would want, but he could do enough athletically to at least keep a defense honest, make that defensive coordinator plan for some of the movement skill, whether it's design rollouts, quick game, getting out of a sack, things like that. I don't think he's going to rush for 1,000 yards in his college career or anything like that, but he can do enough to keep a defense honest and certainly enough to extend the play as an athletic passer. But this is a pro-style guy. Classic three-quarter delivery, smart kid, will throw you open. Not going to wow you with the arm, but the consistency is developing there, and I think that's going to be kind of his calling card. I look at him and Paul Tyson similarly in that they're not going to wow you and drop your jaw with any one thing. They're not going to win any of the long toss throwing competitions that Tua Talia won this past week at the opening. They're not going to run all over the place. They're not going to physically look as imposing, and they're not going to throw darts all over the field, but they're going to be good enough to move the chains, to protect the football, and to win ball games. And at the end of the day, that's really what you want. So I think when you look at game managers, and again, that's not a bad thing, I think he's one of the best available game managers in this class of 2019. He's coming off of 1 year of varsity football, so I think several schools, actually I know several schools want to see a little bit more. There's a couple schools in the SEC, Alabama, Vandy, Tennessee, LSU, that could theoretically take another quarterback at some point, whether it's retaliation for losing one or simply taking a second quarterback. And I think he could fit into the mold with one of those guys. So I know several schools want to see his first few games at Calera and see how he's looking, how he's maybe progressed on Friday nights from junior year to senior year. Because in the offseason, he did a lot of very good things on the 7-on-7 circuit. The kid was willing and able to go out there and compete, put his stuff out there, which is something you like. And then something that needs to be said every time Quad Brown is mentioned is the type of kid he is. He's an infectious kid, big smile. He's a leader. He's a competitor. He has a lot of the classic quarterback qualities that you really don't measure with height, weight, arm strength, accuracy, consistency, things like that. He's got some intangibles there that are definitely on his side. So I'm a fan of the kid in general. He has increased his positioning in the rankings pretty much consistently with us at 24/7. He was a 2-star. We bumped him up to a 3-star after a 7-on-7 early this spring, and he's kind of steadily climbed thereafter. Still not incredibly close to 4-star status with us at 24/7, but he is an 84 right now, which means he's 6 spots away from 4-star status. It's a very simple scale. 90 and above are 4-stars. 80 to 89 are 3-stars. So he's a smack dab in the middle, solid 3-star recruit right now as an 84. And I think that's about right. I think he needs to add more arm strength and be a little bit more dynamic with the football in his hands because he's a decent athlete. I mean, he was all county in basketball, averaged a double-double. Show some more of that as a senior. Show some. Maybe you are a dual threat and we just don't know it yet. I don't think so, but maybe you are. Maybe we hadn't seen the full, Brown arsenal. So I think that could potentially help his stock one day. And obviously, he's got to fill out 6'5", 180, very thin. It doesn't help with getting the advantage or the benefit of the doubt when it comes down to you and one other guy, which is often what it does at that position. So I think he's rated about right. And heck, I'm the guy rating him, so I'm going to feel that way until I don't. But he's a good prospect. I think he's a Power 5 quarterback prospect for sure. And I think he's got a lot to prove this season as a senior, and he could be a strong number 2 type quarterback in the SEC if that is, his desired location. Jay chiming in with a question at JSRollTide on Twitter. Comment on the Talia situation. I've heard the Bama staff isn't worried. Could you also give a percentage of the chances he inks with Bama? Look, Jay and everyone else, this is going to come up every time he makes it, and I'm starting to figure that out. So you look at it from a multitude of ways. One, remember what happened with Tua. Tua committed in May. A lot of other schools still liked him. Oregon, USC, Ole Miss, which was in it more than people think, etc. And he never took visits. He was done. And I don't think he regretted that, but in general, he wanted Talia to take more of the process on, meaning more visits, more experiences. So as a result, you saw Talia, wait a little bit longer, maybe than he needed to make the decision. And he made many more visits just prior to committing to Alabama, but he's going to continue to make them after his commitment. It's not very typical with quarterbacks, but this is what Talia and the family has elected to do. Now, how worried should Bama fans be? Look, Talia likes LSU. Talia likes Tennessee, and I think LSU more than Tennessee at this point. But Tennessee and LSU both recently took quarterbacks. Talia said he was 100% ready to roll just the other day at the opening finals. So I think you kind of take these trips with a grain of salt. It's not even his decision alone. It's really his whole family's decision. And everything points to Alabama at this point. Sure, LSU is selling the heck out of the hey, come compete against your brother angle and blaze your own path. What else would they sell? Their recent quarterback history? The play calling and how exciting it's been for passers? What else are they going to sell? And Tennessee is selling what they've sold to every recruit. New staff, new plan, new path at UT. This ain't your old Tennessee. Things are going to be different. Again, why wouldn't they sell that? So they're going to sell Talia as potentially the face of that new direction. Now, we got to see Brian Marr, the quarterback Tennessee took this weekend, and let's just say that Tennessee would very much still take Talia Tagovailoa. Yeah, I'm going to leave that there. So, the Talia situation. Not a ton to worry about, but Bama is not out of the woods just yet because he will continue to take visits. In terms of a percentage, if I could give a percentage, he ends up at Bama. Man, I'm probably above 80, probably around 90%, which is an A in most schools, if I remember the grading system from many years ago. So I think most Bama fans would take that. I think it's around 90%. There's no such thing as 100% in this business, even though we feel like there are situations that are darn near close to that, like Pierce Quick sticking with Alabama, Paul Tyson sticking with Alabama. Those things feel like close to locks, but there really are no locks in this business. So with Talia, I'll go 90%. He sticks with the Crimson Tide. I think there would have to be multiple kind of stars aligning type of circumstances to get him out of there. One, LSU or Tennessee really starts lighting it up. They lose one of the quarterback commitments for whatever reason, and or Tua ends up leaving Alabama, something like that. It would have to be all of those things at the same time. So I don't think all of those things are going to happen, especially LSU lighting it up from a passing perspective and or Tua leaving this Alabama roster. So I just don't see it happening. It's not impossible, but I really wouldn't worry too much. I know we spent a lot of time talking about that recently, and I feel the same way after spending a few more days in Dallas around Talia, around the Tagovailoas. Look, the whole family was wearing Roll Tide shirts one of the days, coordinated, and every other shirt they wore that was a Talia shirt was coordinated with red and white coloring on the shirts, which is the same type of thing they were wearing when Tua was spinning it at the opening. So again, by every indication, the family is still 100% in with Bama, and Talia is following suit with that. Final group of questions will come from Raphael Monroy. Hope all is well. Happy 4th. Same to you, Rafi. Only 8 or 9 spots left. How many of them do you think will be 5 stars? Which team, if any, will have a chance to catch the tide in the rankings? Raphael, I'll answer the last part right now. Y'all remember Keith Sweat? Nobody. Who's gonna catch Alabama? Nobody. It's a runaway train at this point in the rankings because the guys Alabama is getting. God, that was a terrible rendition, wasn't it? The guys Alabama is picking up that are perceived to be on the lower end of the spectrum of guys they will get are blue chip recruits. So I don't know. I mean, the only 3-star Bama may sign in this class out of 26, 27 guys will be the number 1 kicker in the country, Will Reichard. There is a legitimate chance Alabama signs more than 2 dozen 4 stars or better. That has never happened. I don't even have to research it. I can tell you that has never happened. And the chances of it happening at Alabama right now are very, very high. That's not even getting to the 5 stars, which is sort of in your next round of questioning. And I know you've asked that recently, Rafi, and we've gone through a lot of the 5 stars, and Bama is still in very good shape for a lot of them. We've talked a lot of Kayvon Thibodeau lately. He's in the mix. We talked to Nakobe Dean today. He's in the mix. Obviously, Clay Webb, number one player in the state. Dax Hill, number one safety in the country. He tweeted on Wednesday evening that he is committing very soon. I would urge you to read his update with Hank South and what he had to say about Alabama. Bama very much in that conversation. The Tide is still trying to flip Akeem Dent, the FSU cornerback commitment. He's a 5-star. So as you can see, Ishmael Sopsher, Fa'atui Tuitele, Darn Wright, Evan Neal may be a 5-star one day. As you can tell, there's a bevy of 5 stars there. So if there are only 8 spots remaining or 9 spots remaining, I would venture to say about half of those will be 5 stars. Can you envision Clay Webb anywhere else at this point? I cannot. And between those DBs, Dent and Tyreek Stevenson and Dax Hill, Nick Cross, do you imagine Bama missing on all of them? I do not. So that's 2 5 stars at least right there. Go to the D-line. One of those 2 defensive tackles, Sopsher or Tuitele, pretty likely to end up in Tuscaloosa. So that would be 3 just without digging too much further into the rankings. And new guys will become 5 stars as well, which is something we've talked about. So I think there will be a healthy addition of 5 stars before all is said and done. Trey Sanders is another one who, right now, I mean, out of all the guys we've named, he might be the most likely after Clay Webb. Think about that. So I think 2 to 3 5-star additions is almost the low end of the prediction scale at this point. I know the over-under, I think we set it at, 5 a few weeks ago? I'm still about there. 2 to 3 is the lower end of the projection scale. So I think the number one class is fairly secure. And I also think adding almost as many 5 stars as non-5 stars the rest of the way, very possible for Alabama. That's how good this class is going to be. You see the coaches tweeting about it. You see us talking about it. And it seems like every time we have a new show, there's a new commitment. So that also means this. As the class fills up and the spots become few and far between, there's going to be some movement, fellas and ladies listening. There's going to be some movement. Take a snapshot of the class right now. Not all of those names will be in there February 1st. It's guaranteed. Don't know who, don't know where, don't know why, but there's going to be some movement, because if there's a minimal space situation and multiple 5 stars want to jump on board, guess what? They're going to get that green light. And guess what has to happen as a balancer for that? Somebody's got a gray shirt, somebody's got a delay enrollment, or somebody gets dropped. It's cutthroat, it's not fun, it sucks for the kids, but when you're Alabama and every scholarship is important, it's sort of a casualty of war. It's something that's happened in the past, and under Nick Saban, it is very likely to continue. So that'll do it for today's program. I want to thank Nakobe Dean for joining us. I want to thank producer Kev for finally getting on the mic. I've been begging that guy to jump on in, and I want to thank you for the questions and listening to another week of Crimson and Blue Chips. Big week next week. We'll look back at some of these recent commitments, go deeper in depth, and obviously play more catch-up with Q&A. Thanks for listening, everybody. God bless. Garcia out.
You've been listening to Crimson and Blue Chips with John Garcia Jr. Please be sure to tune in again on Tuesday. Until then, keep up with all the news on Twitter at CABCPOD.